So our first question for tonight goes, Dear Lumpur, what is Abhidhamma chanting? I heard in a talk by Ajahn Anand's translator monk that the monks are chanting the Abhidhamma chant to the dying lay practitioner. Do Theravada forest monks follow the Abhidhamma way? Sadhu.
Well, the Abhidhamma is one of the three baskets or Tripitaka of the Buddhist texts, suttas, Vinaya, monastic discipline, and then the Abhidhamma. So it's often translated as the higher Dhamma, Buddhist psychology, the science of the mind. There's a few different ways people refer to it. But it's traditional for hundreds of years, maybe even back to the time of the Buddha, is to chant verses from the Abhidhamma part of the Buddhist scriptures, particularly at funerals when somebody's died. And those funerals are not a one-off occasion. Sometimes you're chanting Abhidhamma at funeral services for days and days after someone's died. In the case of, say, a senior Buddhist teacher, it can be even a year. Like Ajahn Chah died on the 16th of January, was it 1992? And then the funeral was 1993. So for a year, every night the Abhidhamma was chanted. And that's not uncommon for monks or for lay people, certain lay people. That will take place. So these Abhidhamma chants are verses from the different books of the Abhidhamma explaining about the mind, and particularly how suffering arises in our experience, and then how suffering ceases, and kind of leading the listener, if the listener understood the words, and of course most people don't, but if they did, leading them in a reflection on vipassana, on insight into the selfless or not self nature of the mind and how it's a conditioned thing. So you're probably most familiar with the chant, at a funeral you'll hear Kusala Dhamma, Akusala Dhamma, Apayagata Dhamma. So Kusala Dhamma, wholesome or skillful Dhammas, Akusala Dhamma, unskillful Dhammas. It's one of the central teachings in Buddhism is that we make karma. Karma originates in the mind as volition, intention, leads on to action, whether it's mental action, verbal action, or physical action. And karma is divided into wholesome or unwholesome. So when somebody dies, the belief is they need to hear this as a reminder, because as the consciousness separates from the body, and obviously the premise is that when somebody dies, that's not the end of the story. Consciousness, its condition goes on to another life, or conditions another life, another birth. And so you are chanting or invite monks to chant the Abhidhamma to facilitate a wholesome rebirth and make the occasion meritorious, to get people reflecting on the Dhamma, meditating, contemplating to let go of any unskillful states that may arise, such as grief, anguish. So as a monk who does chant Abhidhamma at funerals once in a while, what do you observe at funerals when the Abhidhamma is chanted? Because it may be partly because it's in Pali, the language, and people are not familiar with it. As soon as the monks chant Abhidhamma, people are talking and catching up. It's a very social event. They're not in a very wholesome state. Some people are obviously caught into grief. Some people are talking about totally unrelated stuff. Very common, you notice, funeral services become a kind of a social thing. So it's a way, chanting the Abhidhamma brings people back to the Dhamma, which is the most useful thing for them, to hear reflections, and hopefully there may be a Dhamma teaching also where it's explained in the language of whoever's listening. So Theravada monks may In Thailand, they speak in Thai. In Australia, they may speak in English, depending on who the crowd is. You hope that there's some Dhamma given to direct the minds of the assembled family and relatives and friends of the person who's died, to give them some advice at that time, how to deal with their grief, to reflect on the impermanence of life, to reflect on karma, the importance of making good karma and abandoning the intention to make bad karma, and so on. And the belief is maybe even the dead, the consciousness of the dead, can hear this and benefit from it. That much we don't know. Unless you have psychic powers and can see beings in other realms, you won't know. But that's the belief. That's one of the backgrounds to it. But it's generally a part of merit making as part of a Buddhist funeral service. And so you get Abhidhamma in Mahayana and Theravada tradition. When Luang Por Chah was still alive but very ill, we used to chant a chant known as the Vipassana Bhumi. The progress is basically the teaching on dependent origination, the sort of central explanation of how suffering arises and how suffering ceases in the human mind. From the Abhidhamma, that we used to chant that for Ajahn Chah every week for a few years, because teachers said it would help him, even though he was, we believe, an arahant and didn't need to practice vipassana anymore. His mind was pure. But the Dhamma has a refreshing effect, even for an arahant, especially one who's old and ill. It can refresh the khandhas, the mind, the body can be refreshed by hearing Dhamma. So that's what we chanted for him, with paritas as well. And you have to remember, arahants maybe are still alive for a number of years after they've reached Nibbana. They still rejoice in the Dhamma, so they may still listen to a Dhamma talk or discuss Dhamma or listen to chanting and recitation of suttas and so on, because they enjoy the Dhamma and it has a refreshing effect. They may still meditate. You may think, well, why do they meditate if they reached enlightenment? Well, they're enjoying the meditation, which is what it's supposed to be. Most people, when they start, it's not very enjoyable because they're not peaceful yet. But the arahant enjoys their meditation. So we have this tradition of Abhidhamma chanted for the dying or at funerals. It's not essential. You could change the chants or have no chants, depending. But because many Buddhists are used to, are familiar with this structure, then it will take place. People will do it. So as a monk, you learn at least basic Abhidhamma chants. Some monks learn very detailed, long ones as well. That's part of the Buddhist funeral service.
Sadhu Luang Por. So our next question, there's a bit of background info and a few parts to the question. So I will read it out. Dear Ajahn, many thanks for giving the Dhamma talk. I see my attachment in learning the Dhamma and leading the life towards relinquishment. This gives me lots of happiness and a sense of contentment for having enough to eat and wear, having a place to stay, and abundance of healthcare in our country. I really aspire to my children to go forth to the homeless life, and hence I will have more time to practice Dhamma and support them in the noble path in my old age. I am sure for now that this is what I want for them, as I know this is the best gift that I could ever offer them as a mum for giving them life. I am striving to lead by example too. I still have many defilements to deal with, but am guiding them towards my best ability. And so this aspiration keeps me going on in life. However, I know them that they are not me. They might not want to be ordained, but there's a question here. So with all of this, how can I support them and myself towards reaching this goal, other than guiding them about the importance of accumulating abundance of good karma to end our karma?
Well, you seem to understand what you have to do already. As a parent, it is the greatest gift you can give your children once you've established them, say, in material well-being. They have enough food and education and medical care for when they're sick and so on, and then lots of love and support, emotional support. And then try to introduce them to the Dhamma. But that's a skill in itself, as you will find out. So some parents push too hard and put their kids off. Some parents don't try hard enough and their kids just have no idea what Dhamma is or Buddhism is. So you're trying to find the middle way where you're introducing them to the Dhamma, giving them the chance to learn and find out. But in the end, they have to choose for themselves, and you have to accept that. Like you said, they're their own person. They have their own character, their own karma, and they may gain faith in Buddhism and want to pursue Buddhist practice, or they may not. You have to accept that. But I would say for young kids, number one, get them familiar with some of the rituals and the basics of Buddhism. So like, very simple meditations on loving kindness or breathing meditation for a few minutes here and there. Maybe once a day would be ideal. Seeing a Buddha statue, going to a monastery where they meet monks or nuns, getting them used to offering dana and helping people, and not just sangha, but supporting people who are sick or elderly or disabled or anyone who needs help. There's a whole range of activities you introduce them to. However much they follow or understand depends on them, but at least give them the chance to see some of these good activities. And then in their thinking, get them to think about karma, that their actions have consequences. What they say, what they do matters, because it will come back to them. If you are hurting others, even creatures, animals and insects, it will come back on you. You hurt others, others will hurt you. You steal from others, others will steal from you. You criticize others, others will criticize you, and so on. How we act towards others matters. Our relationships to the environment, to the world, to the people around us. Try and get them to think more about karma. Sometimes you don't even have to call that Buddhism, because some kids may reject Buddhism. You have to accept that. But if you can get them to understand about karma, cause and result, action, reaction, that will help them their whole life, because get them in the habit of thinking about what they're doing, the consequences before they do something or say something, to think what kind of results will arise from this action, this speech. That's such a useful lesson, I think. But everyone's different, so you do your best as a parent. You just do the best. And like you say, you have to be an example. If you want your kids to learn meditation, you have to meditate. There's no way they're going to think about meditation if you don't do it. You've got to show its value. If you want to get your kids listening to Dhamma, you have to listen to Dhamma. If you want your kids to practice generosity, charity, generosity, you have to show them how to do it. That's the best way, to be an example first, and hopefully they'll follow along, or at least be exposed to some of these things, and then maybe they'll follow and understand. You just do the best you can. And of course, you may not be able to teach them with everything, so also expose them to teachers, monks, nuns, people who have skill in teaching. That will help them as well. So bring them to meet teachers.
Sadhu. And the next part of the question is, so following on from here, I see some defilements arising from within, as I know I do not wish to be a grandparent. I don't find it joyful to have grandkids. There's so much suffering in the world. I don't wish my kids to bring any humans in to suffer, etc.? Is this a right view?
I wouldn't worry about that kind of thing. It's their choice, not yours. Your job is to bring up your kids the best you can as a parent. Once they're adults, let them make their choices. Maybe they want kids. Maybe it's good for them to have kids. There's certain benefits that come from having families, kids, and so on. And the Buddha didn't say all Buddhists should not have kids. I understand your sentiment that you see the suffering of the world and you don't want new kids coming in, but you've already had your kids. You've made your choice, so you have to accept that. And then other human beings, your kids or other people, that they have their choice to make, and it's not your choice, is it? So rather than thinking in that way, I would focus on your Dhamma practice. As your kids grow up and they become independent financially, they study and then they get work, maybe they have their own families, their own marriage, whatever. I would focus on your own practice. Learn to meditate. Now your kids are grown up, then you can let go of all the worries and you get a lot more free time and energy. Put it into the Dhamma practice. And that may still help them in an indirect way when they're adults, because they may see you practicing and they may say, oh, that's a good way to use your time when you get older. Some people retire from work or they retire from bringing up their kids and they don't know what to do. And they sit there, waste their time at home, falling into depression or moods or doing unskillful things or running around cheating on their partner or going into gambling or doing unskillful things, becoming drunk or whatever. Some people do that. If you can show how to use your time skillfully as you get older, to keep precepts, meditate, learn the Dhamma, do more generosity, maybe volunteer work, all kinds of things you can do, or even you ordain yourself and become a monk or a nun yourself, that can help your kids. They see that. And I know one or two families where the parents, when they reach the right time, the kids have grown up, and then mum or dad goes into the monastery, and that becomes a real teaching for the family because, you're still the parent, even though you're now maybe keeping precepts, living in a more monastic environment. They want to come and visit you. They're coming into the monastery. They get to hear the Dhamma. And if you've taken on precepts, 8 precepts, or the precepts of a monk or a nun, when you talk Dhamma to them or talk to them, you can introduce a lot of good Dhamma because you're practicing full on in the monastery. So it can be a very good thing. It's not for everyone, of course, but I know one or two parents who've become monks or nuns and then they teach their kids and even grandkids very well. And they can become a blessing to the wider extended family as well as other people as well. So let's see how your practice goes, and I wish you well.
Sadhu Lingpo. Another question. Dear Ajahn, now my monkey mind is quiet and calm during meditation. So is the next step to observe it? Thank you.
Well, in the meditation, your number one priority is preserve it. Keep the mindfulness effort going to keep mindful, bring up mindfulness. As you're more calm, you'll be able to reflect more for longer and in a more deep and profound way. So reflect on the impermanence of your body, your mind, what we call the 5 khandhas. Thoughts, feelings, memories, the body itself. Contemplate it. These things are impermanent, they're not self. This is vipassana, focusing on the 3 characteristics of existence in your experience. When your mind is calm, you're mindful, you can turn to do that. So observe a thought arising, passing away. Say, oh, it's impermanent, doesn't last. What's impermanent is not really a self, it's not really you. Or analyze the body, go into the body, 32 parts of the body, 4 elements, Ask yourself the question, is this body really a me, a self, mine? Or is it a collection of elements that nobody really owns? It's not really a permanent, lasting entity. You keep asking that question and observing. So use the peaceful mind to investigate the Dhamma. But say when you finish your formal meditation, you go away and do other things, try not to just give up the practice. Keep practicing. So how can you keep mindful in daily life after your meditation? What activities distract you and ruin your mindfulness practice? You know, if you finish your meditation and you go to a party, a dinner party, and you're drinking and partying, well, you're not going to keep much mindfulness probably. So maybe your lifestyle is something you look into, how you spend your time, who you spend your time with, what you're doing. Or maybe you're somebody who's a workaholic and you meditate and become calm, and then you go off and work for the next 10 hours and become really stressed and frazzled and burnt out. And maybe you need to adjust there. Or relationships, you meditate and feel calm and peaceful and reflective, and then go off and you have lots of arguments. So I would look at the relationship between meditation and lifestyle and how you spend your time, and you learn from that. At those times when you're not meditating, you're still looking and learning about how to bring up mindfulness, keep precepts, and so on.
Sadhu. Next question. When living in society outside of monasteries, most people are not practicing Dhamma and even enjoy using harsh speech to others or not trying to cultivate good hearts. Sometimes I feel a bit difficult to face these people. I try to avoid some, but some are hard to avoid, especially at work and with family. And this does drain my chitta and energy out. Drain my chitta energy out. What to do, Ajahn?
Hurry up and get enlightened, and you won't have to be reborn again. That's an easy answer. Yeah, you have to have a lot of patience with living in the world, I know. Somebody was here the other day and they said, oh, I just keep meeting angry people everywhere. And it can seem like that, but I would be careful because there are actually a lot of good people, and you often don't notice the good people. They're more peaceful, just getting on with their lives, not bothering anyone. They often don't make much impact. So sometimes pause and just look around. Maybe the good people are there, or in your own mind, there's goodness there. And you focus on that. If you can't find the good people outside, focus on the good in you and keep nurturing that, nourishing it, bringing it up. And with others, have a lot of patience, compassion. Don't make life worse by, getting into conflicts and arguments with all these angry people you meet at work and in life. Be very patient. Like you say, some people you avoid. If you can't avoid them, you just have to be careful, put up with them, feel sorry for them. If you cultivate compassion, that helps because you realize that you getting angry with that angry person is not going to help. No need to add to the problem. And you make sure you protect yourself and look after yourself the best you can in each situation, but try not to make it worse. But don't expect too much from the world. Of course, the world is full of all kinds of people, and some are more like devas and very peaceful, peace-loving people, and some are more angry and lost. A lot of people in the world are lost, aren't they? They just don't know what is good and bad, right and wrong. They don't know how to achieve happiness. So feel sorry for them, but maybe there's not a lot you can do other than look after your own practice, your own immediate life, the people around you and your practice. That's what you have to focus on. So be very patient, compassionate, and get on with the practice. Mm-hmm.
Sadhu Lumpur. Another question. Dear Ajahn, do monks in the Theravada tradition cite mantra. I think maybe they might mean chant mantras. Thank you.
We certainly use meditation words, phrases. Sometimes some people like to recite whole sutras, long ones they learn in Pali. Sometimes just a phrase. So, like we were talking earlier about the Abhidhamma, like a very common phrase you might recite to reflect on impermanence and death is anicca vata sankhara. All conditions are impermanent. Just an example. And people use that like as a phrase to recite over and over again, both to bring up mindfulness, calm the mind, but also it has good meaning. Or we use the word Buddha, so people recollect the Buddha. So they may chant the whole or recite the whole verse, recollecting the qualities of the Buddha. Iti piso bhagava arahang sama sambuddho vicha charana sampano sukato lokavidu anutaro purisa dhammasarati sata deva manusanam buddho bhagavati. And you can recite the whole thing over and over again. So sometimes people do it 108 times or even 1,000 times. Or, they pick a number, sometimes their age. So the older you get, the more times you recite. Or sometimes they pick the one word, so like Buddha, and just recite Buddha, 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 until it really sticks in the mind. If it's sticking in the mind, you might go to sleep reciting Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. You might wake up reciting Buddha, Buddha, Buddha. So some people might think, well, that sounds weird. Sounds like you're just becoming some kind of parrot and just reciting Buddha. But it's to be done with mindfulness. If it's done properly, the idea is to bring up mindful awareness. So it's not done in a kind of perfunctory way. You're doing it to sharpen your awareness, not to become dull or caught into some habitual action. But it takes practice. You practice with it, whether it's one word or phrase. It could be Pali language, it could be English or whatever your personal language is. You can devise phrases or words that suit you. So some people use English and they say, let go or be peaceful or forgive. Or, whatever you need to hear that works for you, you can try it. It's just one way to train the mind. It's not the only way, but it's one way. And in Theravada Buddhism, we use this way as well. Or some people just learn whole suttas or what we call parita chanting, and then they use these paritas or suttas and they just chant a lot. Some people chant for an hour at a time. So you can experiment for yourself, see what works for you to calm the mind and bring up more mindfulness and also insight as well.
Sadhu. Are there any more questions? Looks like there's no more questions in the talk.
So very nice talking to you tonight on this pleasant night with the full moon over. So we'll say goodbye there and wish you all well. May the blessings of Buddha Dhamma Sangha guide you and protect you till next time. And we'll just finish paying respects to the Buddha Dhamma Sangha.